This is my true story. I worked my whole life to raise my son, to give him comfort, and even in old age, I tried to make his life easier. But one day, I learned how little he respected me. My son took the battery from my wheelchair so his wife could charge her car. I sat there, trapped, listening to them laugh as they drove away. That day, something inside me broke, but I didn't cry. I made a phone call that changed everything. Before I tell you what I did next, tell me where you're watching from. And please subscribe so more people hear my story. From the day my son was born, I lived for him. I didn't grow up with much myself, and I swore he would never feel the hunger or the shame I once felt as a child. That promise became my driving force, my reason to keep going, even when life beat me down. I worked in factories for decades, long, grueling shifts, the kind where your body aches in places you didn't know existed, and the noise of the machines follows you into your sleep. My hands were rough and scarred, my back bent from lifting heavy loads, but every ache and every scar felt worth it because I knew the money was putting food on my son's plate and hope in his future. When he was young, I sacrificed everything so he could go to school without worry. While other kids wore secondhand clothes, I made sure he had shoes that fit, clean notebooks, and the kind of lunch I never had when I was his age. If I had to skip meals, I skipped them. If I had to work overtime until my eyes could barely stay open, I did it. I remember one winter when the factory barely had work, and money was so tight I couldn't afford new boots for myself. My feet froze on the walk to work, toes burning with cold. But that same week, my son walked proudly into school with a brand new coat. He never knew what I endured, but I smiled because he had what I didn't. As he grew older, the sacrifices only got bigger. When he needed his first car to get to work, I didn't hesitate. I took out a small loan and worked even more shifts to pay it off. That car wasn't just metal and wheels. It was my way of telling him, I believe in your future. And later, when he met his wife and they wanted a home together, I emptied most of my savings to help with the down payment. I told myself this was what a father should do, give his children the best chance possible, even if it meant giving up pieces of his own life. Even after I retired, I didn't stop helping. Retirement didn't bring comfort for me. It brought tighter budgets and health issues. But whenever he called me with a bill he was struggling to pay, I reached into my modest pension and gave what I could. When his wife wanted that shiny electric car she was so proud of, I even contributed toward it. I told myself that giving them comfort was part of my duty. That if I continued to give, they would continue to love and respect me. I thought my sacrifices were investments in love, in family, in gratitude. I thought that when I was older, when my body couldn't do the work anymore, my son would look back at all I had given and remember. I thought he would say, Dad gave me everything. Now it's my turn to take care of him. That belief was what kept me going through the aches of old age, through the pain of the accident that left me in a wheelchair. I told myself I was not alone. I had my son. But as I would soon learn, sacrifices don't always buy loyalty. Kindness doesn't always return as kindness. Sometimes, all the years of giving only teach people to take more. My son took and took, until there was almost nothing left of me but a tired old man in a wheelchair. And even then, he still found a way to take more. The bitter truth settled over me slowly. All my life, I had thought I was building him up with love, when really, I was teaching him that I would never say no, that I would always bend, always give, always put his comfort above my own. I had given him everything, my time, my money, my health, my years. And yet, when the time came for me to need him, I learned how little that meant. I had been a father who sacrificed. He had become a son who only took. After the accident, my life changed forever. One wrong step on a slippery floor, one moment of losing balance, and suddenly, I was no longer the man who had worked his whole life with strong arms and legs. The doctors told me plainly, I would never walk properly again. My legs had lost their strength, and though I could stand for short moments, real movement was gone. From that day, the wheelchair became not just a tool, but my lifeline. Without it, I was trapped, a prisoner inside four walls, dependent on others for every simple thing. At first, I resisted. I hated the thought of being rolled around, of being seen as weak. For so long, I had been the provider, the man who carried heavy loads, the father who never asked for help. Sitting in that chair made me feel like half a man, like a burden. But as weeks turned into months, I had no choice but to accept it. The wheelchair gave me something my legs no longer could: freedom. With it, I could go to the kitchen, to the bathroom, to the porch to feel the sun on my face. Without it, I would have been stranded in bed, helpless. The battery was the heart of that wheelchair. It wasn't just a machine, it was my breath of independence. A fully charged battery meant I could move with dignity, roll myself outside, make a cup of tea without crawling. Every time I pressed the joystick and felt the chair glide forward, I felt a little piece of my old self return. I could still decide where to go, when to move, how to live. Without the battery, though, the chair was nothing but dead weight. Without it, I was reduced to crawling on my hands like a child or sitting helplessly until someone chose to notice me. My son promised me I'd never have to worry. After the accident, he said the words every father longs to hear. "Don't worry, Dad. I'll take care of you now. I'll make sure you have everything you need." I believed him. I trusted that after all my years of sacrifice, he would keep that promise. I told myself that even though my body had failed me, my son never would. And for a while, it seemed true. He checked on the chair, made sure the charger was working, even bought a new cushion for me once. I remember thanking him with tears in my eyes, telling him how much it meant. He shrugged it off, but in my heart, I thought, this is love. This is my son returning everything I gave him. But promises can fade. Kindness can disappear. Slowly, I began to notice a shift. He was less patient when I needed help plugging in the charger. He rolled his eyes if I asked him to check the battery. Sometimes he would sigh loudly, as though my very existence was an inconvenience. Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself he was tired, busy with work, stressed. I didn't want to be a burden. The truth was harder to accept. To him, my wheelchair was not sacred. It wasn't the key to my dignity, my independence, my survival. To him, it was just another plug, another machine using electricity in his house. He forgot that the chair was my body now. He forgot that without it, I was nothing but a prisoner in my own skin. Every night before I went to bed, I checked the battery myself, making sure it was charging, making sure tomorrow I could move. That small green light gave me peace. It meant that when morning came, I could still live with some measure of freedom. But the night before he took it, I didn't know it would be the last time I saw that light glowing beside my bed. I depended on that wheelchair for everything, for movement, for dignity, for life itself, and my son knew it. He knew it better than anyone. That's what made what he did next feel like more than selfishness. It felt like betrayal. It happened on an ordinary morning, the kind of day where nothing seems different at first. I woke up, stretched my arms, and reached for the controls of my wheelchair, ready to roll into the kitchen for my tea. But when I pushed the joystick forward, nothing happened. The chair sat silent, heavy, unmoving. I tried again, pressing harder, hoping maybe I had bumped the switch by accident. Still, nothing. My heart began to pound as I leaned over, checking the battery connection. The slot was empty. The battery was gone. Panic swept over me. Without that battery, I was stuck. My legs couldn't carry me, not even across the room. I sat there, frozen, staring at the empty socket as if it might magically refill itself. A cold realization washed over me. Someone had taken it, and there was only one person who could have. I called out for my son. When he appeared in the doorway, I asked him where the battery was. He didn't look ashamed or concerned. He looked annoyed, like I had disturbed him. With a shrug, he said, I took it out. We needed the plug to charge the car. My wife has to drive today. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. You took my wheelchair battery? You know I can't move without it, I finally managed to say, my voice shaking. He sighed, rolling his eyes as if I was being dramatic. Dad, stop acting like it's the end of the world. The car is more important. She needs it to get to work. You'll survive sitting here for a while. Those words cut deeper than any knife. The car is more important than you. That was what he was really saying. The woman he married, the machine she drove, mattered more than his own father's ability to move, to live with dignity. My lifeline, my only freedom, was reduced to nothing compared to their convenience. I tried to protest, to explain how much I depended on that battery. But before I could finish, he snapped at me, his voice sharp and cruel. Stop complaining. You just sit around all day anyway. What difference does it make if you sit in your room for a few more hours? His words echoed in the silence that followed. My son, the boy I had raised, the man I had given everything to, was standing there telling me that my life, my needs, my independence, none of it mattered. To him, I was just a useless old man in a chair, wasting electricity, taking up space. He walked away after that, leaving me stranded in my room. I sat there, staring at the empty battery slot, my hands trembling on the cold armrests of the chair. The silence pressed in on me like a weight, heavier than the chair itself. For the first time, I felt what it truly meant to be powerless. Not just physically trapped, but emotionally discarded. My own son had chosen a car over me. And then, as I listened through the window, I heard the sound of laughter. His wife's voice, cheerful, carefree, and his voice joining hers as they got into the car. The engine started, and a few minutes later, they drove away, leaving me behind. The roar of that car engine felt like a slap across my face. They had stolen my movement so they could enjoy theirs. In that moment, something broke inside me. Not just my trust, but the very foundation of love I had for him. I realized that to him, I wasn't his father anymore. I wasn't the man who raised him, who gave him everything. I was just a burden, an inconvenience, someone he could strip of dignity without a second thought. The selfish act of taking that battery was more than cruelty. It was betrayal. And as I sat there, helpless and alone, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. He thought he had taken my power away, but he had only given me the reason to take his away instead. That day was the longest and most humiliating day of my life. When my son rolled my wheelchair into the corner and left without the battery, he didn't just trap my body, he trapped my dignity. The chair sat there, useless, nothing but cold metal and dead weight, and I sat inside it like a prisoner. I tried to push it forward, but without power, it didn't budge an inch. I was stuck. My legs were too weak to stand. My hands trembled on the armrests. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be truly powerless in my own home. I needed water, but the kitchen felt like it was a world away. I thought of crawling. Yes, crawling like a child on my hands and knees, just to reach the sink. The thought alone brought tears to my eyes. I had once been a man who worked 16-hour shifts in factories, who carried bricks and steel on his back, who lifted his son onto his shoulders to see fireworks on summer nights. Now, here I was, an old man trapped in a chair without its battery, reduced to considering crawling on the floor for a sip of water. I tried to call for help, but no one was there. The walls of the house echoed with silence. My son and his wife had already left in their shiny electric car, the same car that now carried the power my wheelchair needed. Through the window, I could hear their voices as they laughed, carefree, enjoying the ride they had stolen from me. The sound burned in my ears. They weren't just taking electricity, they were taking my independence, my pride, my very right to move. Hours passed, and hunger gnawed at me. I thought about the food in the kitchen, leftovers in the fridge, bread on the counter, all just out of reach. My body ached from sitting so long in one place. My bladder hurt, but I couldn't get to the bathroom. The humiliation of that need, of knowing I had no way to reach the toilet without the chair, cut deeper than words. I felt like less than a man. I felt invisible. At one point, a neighbor knocked on the door, probably to drop something off. I wanted to shout, to call for help, but shame kept my mouth closed. I couldn't bear the thought of them seeing me like that, helpless in my own home, abandoned by my own son. So I sat there, silent, while the knocking faded and the neighbor walked away. My pride chained me as much as the missing battery did. The hours crawled by, slower than ever. Every tick of the clock reminded me that I was nothing more than furniture to my son. He hadn't even thought of what it meant for me to be left without power. Or worse, maybe he had thought of it and simply didn't care. That thought sat heavy in my chest. Maybe my suffering doesn't matter to him anymore. When the sun began to set, I could hear the car return. The crunch of tires on gravel, the laughter of my son and his wife carrying shopping bags, the slam of doors as they walked inside. I sat there, still stuck in the same position. Tears dried on my face. They didn't even glance at me as they walked past. My son tossed the battery on the counter casually, as if it was nothing, as if he hadn't stolen a whole day of my life. "I'll plug it back in later," he muttered, heading into the kitchen with his wife. Not once did he ask if I was okay. Not once did he notice the stiffness in my body, the pain in my back, the emptiness in my stomach. To him, my day of humiliation meant nothing. To me, it meant everything. It was the day I realized I no longer had a place in his heart. That night, lying in bed after he finally put the battery back, I stared at the ceiling for hours. The pain in my body was sharp, but the pain in my soul was sharper. I replayed every moment, every laugh I heard from outside, every second I spent stuck, every thought of crawling. I knew then that the humiliation wasn't an accident. It was the truth revealed. I wasn't respected. I wasn't valued. To them, I was less important than a car, and that was the moment the fire inside me lit. The humiliation broke me, yes, but in breaking me, it also hardened me. It gave me clarity. If they could treat me like this once, they would do it again. If I stayed silent, I would spend the rest of my life crawling in shame. But if I acted, if I used the power they had forgotten I still had, I could take back everything. That day of humiliation was the last day I allowed myself to be weak. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was just an old man in a chair, too weak to fight back, too dependent to make decisions. My son and his wife laughed freely, treated me like I was nothing, because in their minds I had no power left. But the truth is, they had forgotten something very important, something I had never forgotten. The house they lived in, the car they drove, the money they pulled from our shared accounts. All of it had my name at the top. Years ago, when I helped them get on their feet, I thought I was being kind by adding their names to things. It was meant to make life easier for them, a gesture of trust, a father's way of saying, "I've got your back." They didn't know the full truth. Adding their names didn't erase mine. I was still the primary holder. I was still the one with the final say. Every mortgage payment, every car bill, every bank account line, all of it ran back to me. Without me, they had no legal claim. Without me, the things they thought they owned were nothing but paper dreams, and I had kept quiet about it all. I had let them believe they were in control. I had let them boast to their friends about their house, their money, their car. I had stayed silent while they built their pride on foundations I still owned. But that day, sitting in my chair without a battery, humiliated and ignored, I realized the gift of their arrogance. They had forgotten who really held the power. They thought age had made me weak. They thought my silence meant surrender. What they didn't realize was that silence can be the sharpest weapon of all. I remembered every signature on every document. I remembered every line of every agreement. They had no idea how much I had kept in my own name. They never asked, never bothered to check, because they assumed the old man in the chair was too tired, too fragile, too broken to do anything. They were wrong. That night, after the humiliation of being left powerless, I looked around the house and saw it differently. The walls they decorated, the furniture they bought, the life they bragged about, none of it truly belonged to them. It was mine, all mine, held together by the sacrifices I made, the work I put in, the papers I signed. They thought they had stripped me of dignity, but in reality, I was still the one holding the keys to everything. And as I sat in that chair, my body aching but my mind sharp, I realized something else. Kindness had blinded me for too long. I had given and given, thinking love would be enough to bind us together. But they had mistaken my giving for weakness. They thought I would never push back, never remind them where the real power was. That was their mistake. That was their blind spot. I thought back to the moment my son said the car was more important than me. His words echoed in my mind like poison. You'll survive without it. He believed I had no choice but to accept his cruelty. But what he didn't know was that while he and his wife were out riding in their shiny car, laughing at my expense, I still had choices. I had tools sharper than words. I had authority heavier than any slap across the face. They forgot that in this world, paper is power. Contracts, titles, accounts, these were the real batteries that kept their life moving. And unlike the wheelchair battery they stole from me, I still controlled all of those. With one call, I could take back everything. With one signature, I could erase their names from the life they thought was theirs. The truth they forgot was simple. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't trapped. I wasn't just the old man in the corner chair. I was the one who made their lives possible. And just as easily as I had given, I could take it all away. That realization burned through me like fire. For the first time in years, I felt strong again. My body might have been broken, but my mind was sharp, and the law was still on my side. They had forgotten that. They had forgotten me. But I would remind them, not with shouting, not with pleading, but with silence and a phone call that would leave their entire world collapsing. That night, I sat in my room staring at the wheelchair battery socket. The emptiness of that slot felt like a mirror of the emptiness my son had left in my heart. The silence of the house pressed down on me. I could hear them in the other room laughing about their day, bragging about the shopping they had done with the car, not even thinking about what they had left me to endure. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something had to change. This was not just a bad day. This was a line that had been crossed, a wound that could not be covered with silence anymore. For years, I had told myself to be patient. I told myself, he is stressed, he is busy, he will come around. I excused the disrespect, the cold words, the rolling eyes. I thought love meant waiting. I thought love meant forgiving again and again. But after today, I knew the truth. Forgiveness had only made them bolder. My silence had given them permission to treat me like dirt. Every insult I swallowed had taught them that I would never fight back. And now, stealing my battery to power their car was the proof of how far they believed they could go. I sat there thinking of all the years I had given to him. The nights I worked myself half to death in the factory. The savings I poured into his education, his first car, his house. The money I gave even after retirement. Every sacrifice had been made with one hope, that when I grew old and weak, he would remember me with love. But what had I received instead? Disrespect, humiliation, and now abandonment. The boy I raised with love had turned into a man who saw me as nothing but an obstacle, a burden, a leftover part of the past he wanted to push aside. The decision came slowly, then all at once. At first, my heart hurt at the thought of it. I am his father, I thought. Could I really strip everything away from him? Could I really take back the things he believed were his? But then I remembered crawling in my mind through the kitchen for water. I remembered the ache of my bladder as I sat stuck in that chair for hours. I remembered the sound of them laughing while I suffered alone? And the answer became clear. Yes, I could. I would. Because he had left me no choice. Kindness had failed. Silence had failed. Only action would protect what dignity I had left. I realized that night that my love for him did not require me to let him destroy me. Love does not mean accepting cruelty. Respect must be earned, not demanded, and he had lost mine forever, so I made my decision. The next morning, while they went out on another ride in the car, I would pick up the phone. I would not scream. I would not confront them with tears or arguments. I would use the quiet power they had forgotten I still held. I would remind them, not with words, but with loss. I pictured it clearly in my mind. Their faces when they discovered the accounts were frozen, their cards declined, their names erased. I imagined the panic when they realized the house and the car they bragged about were not theirs after all. That vision gave me a strange calm. For the first time in years, I felt control again. The battery they took had left me powerless for a day. But tomorrow, I would take back the real battery of their lives. The money, the accounts, the ownership. They thought I was helpless. They thought I had nothing left to fight with. But the decision I made that night would prove them wrong. I sat back in my chair, the pain in my body heavy, but my heart lighter than it had been in years. I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, it ends." And for the first time, I slept peacefully, because I knew I was no longer their victim. I was the one holding the match, ready to burn down the illusion they had built. The next morning came quietly. I woke early, before the sun had even risen, my mind sharper than it had been in years. I heard the sound of my son and his wife moving around the house, getting ready for their day. Their voices were cheerful, their laughter echoing through the walls. They had no idea what was coming. They thought life would continue as usual, that I would stay in my corner, silent and obedient, while they took what they wanted. When they finally left, the roar of the car engine fading down the street, I sat for a long time staring at the phone. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for it, but it wasn't fear. It was power. It had been years since I'd felt this much control. Years since I held the ability to change my life with one action. That phone call was my battery now. That phone call was my freedom. I dialed the number to the bank. The familiar automated voice greeted me, then the line transferred to a representative. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" I took a deep breath and spoke clearly, without hesitation. "I want to make changes to my accounts, effective immediately, remove both my son's and his wife's names from everything. All joint access ends today." The representative paused, then asked for my identification details. I gave them, my voice steady, my heart pounding. She confirmed my authority, confirmed I was the primary holder, the only one with legal power. Her words felt like a victory. "Yes, Mr. Rao. You are the owner. We can process your request." "Do it now," I said. She typed away, and I imagined the sound of the keyboard as the sound of chains breaking. "Their access is frozen," she said a moment later. "Their cards will no longer work. Do you also want to transfer the balances?" "Yes," I replied firmly. "Move all funds into a new private account under my name only." She asked for final confirmation. I didn't hesitate. "Yes, do it." Within minutes, it was done. Just like that, the power shifted. What they thought was theirs had vanished. Their cards and their wallets were now nothing but useless plastic. The accounts they relied on were locked. The life they bragged about, the comfort they took for granted, was slipping away as they drove, unaware of what I had just done. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. The room felt different now. Yesterday, I had been powerless, trapped without my battery. Today, with one call, I had taken their battery out of their lives. The satisfaction was cold, not joyful, but it was strong. It was justice. I pictured the moment they would stop for gas or groceries, swiping their card with smug smiles, only to see it declined. I imagined their confusion, their panic, the dawning realization that something had gone terribly wrong. I thought of their faces twisting from arrogance into fear, and I felt no guilt. Because this was not revenge out of spite, this was balance. They had stolen my dignity, my independence, my humanity. I had simply taken back what was always mine. Before ending the call, I asked the representative one more question. Is there any record left of their names on these accounts? No, sir, she replied. As of now, everything is under you alone. Legally, they have no claim. Her words settled in my chest like a weight lifted. I thanked her, hung up, and placed the phone on the table. My hands stopped trembling. My heart was calm. The silence of the house no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful. That phone call was more than paperwork. It was the end of years of humiliation, the end of being treated like nothing. For once, I hadn't raised my voice, I hadn't begged, I hadn't argued. I had simply used the truth they had forgotten, that I still had power. And with that call, I had changed everything. After the phone call, I sat quietly for a long time. The house was empty, the silence deep. But inside me, there was a storm that had finally calmed. I knew what I had done. I knew what would happen when they found out. But I also knew one thing. I could not stay here to watch it. If I remained, they would scream, curse, maybe even try to force me to undo what I had done. I had no desire to argue, no desire to defend myself. My work was finished. My revenge was sealed. What was left now was my escape. I rolled my chair to the window and looked outside. The garden I once cared for with my hands now looked like it belonged to strangers. The house I had paid for with my sweat and blood no longer felt like mine. Every wall, every room, carried the sound of their laughter and my humiliation. I realized then that I could never find peace under this roof again. If I stayed, I would only be reminded of crawling in shame, of sitting powerless while they drove off with my freedom. No, I would leave, and I would never come back. That afternoon, while they were still out, I packed. It did not take long. I had lived long enough to know that the only things worth carrying were the things you could not replace. Documents, a little money in cash, my medicines, a few clothes, and one photograph of my late wife. Everything else, the furniture, the dishes, the gifts I had once given them, I left behind. They had taken so much from me already, but I would not let them take the last part of me that still mattered, my freedom. I folded my clothes slowly, carefully, placing them into the small suitcase I had kept for years. Each item I packed felt like a goodbye, a quiet farewell to a life that had become unbearable. I did not leave a note. I did not owe them words. Words had lost all meaning between us. They had silenced me with cruelty, and now I would silence them with absence. When the suitcase was ready, I placed it by the door. I sat in my chair, waiting for the taxi I had arranged earlier. My heart pounded with every passing minute, afraid they might return before I left. But fate was kind. The taxi arrived first. The driver, a kind young man, loaded my bag into the trunk. He helped me into the car, folding the wheelchair into the back seat. As we pulled away from the house, I did not look back. My eyes stayed forward. The past was behind me, and it no longer belonged to me. The drive to the station felt like freedom itself. Each mile between me and that house was a chain breaking off my body. For years I had been tied to them, hoping for love, waiting for respect that never came. But now, for the first time in decades, I belonged to myself again. At the station, I bought a ticket to the next city. From there, I would take a train farther away, to a place where my name meant only what I chose it to mean. The lawyer already had instructions for what to do if they tried to fight. My accounts were safe. My decision was final. They would wake up tomorrow and find me gone, and with me, everything they thought they owned. As I sat on the train, watching the fields roll past the window, I felt a strange peace. My heart no longer carried the weight of anger. the revenge was done. The silence was complete. They had taken my battery, left me powerless, laughed as I suffered. But in the end, I had taken everything they relied on, and I had left without a sound. When they came home, they would find the house empty, my room bare, my chair gone. They would try to use their cards, only to discover they no longer worked. They would search for me, call my phone, curse my name, but I would be beyond their reach. The man they thought was trapped had vanished, and he was never coming back. When they came home that evening, I was already gone. The first thing they noticed was the quiet. My wheelchair wasn't in the corner where they always expected it to be. My room door stood open, the bed neatly made, the drawers empty. There was no suitcase, no clothes, no medicine bottles, nothing left behind. I imagine at first they thought little of it. Maybe they assumed I had gone out with a neighbor, maybe to the doctor. But soon they began to realize something was wrong. My son opened the wardrobe. Empty. He looked under the bed. Nothing. His wife searched the kitchen, then the garage. Every corner of the house carried the same message. I had left, and I had taken only what mattered to me. Panic must have started then, the kind of panic that grows when you realize you are not in control anymore. I was not there to see it, but I know exactly what happened next. His wife probably reached for her card to order dinner, only to find it declined. She must have tried again, her face twisting with confusion. My son, frustrated, likely pulled out his own wallet and swiped his card, also declined. That was when it would have hit them. The truth. The accounts they relied on, the money they thought was theirs, the safety net they bragged about, gone. I can picture my son's face in that moment. The arrogance drained, replaced by anger and fear. He would have grabbed his phone, calling me again and again. I imagine my phone lighting up, ringing endlessly in some hotel room drawer, but I never answered. His voice on the voicemail, first demanding, then pleading, then breaking into desperation. "Dad, what did you do? Where are you? Please call me back." His words would bounce against silence, because I was done listening. Soon after, the lawyer's letter would arrive. Inside, the truth laid out cold and final. Their names removed from every account, their access stripped, their rights gone. Everything tied to me was now only mine again. The house they stood in was no longer safe because the mortgage and title were not theirs. The car in the driveway, the one they stole power for by taking my battery, was tied to my name too. They could drive it, but legally, it was no longer theirs to keep. The humiliation I had felt when he left me powerless in my chair was now his to carry. Each knock on the door from a creditor, each notice in the mail, each declined payment, all of it would remind him of what he had done. He had stolen my movement for one day. I had stolen his future forever. I imagine the silence in that house now. No more laughter echoing through the walls. No more smug jokes at my expense. Just two people pacing, arguing, blaming each other as their world crumbles. The neighbors would notice, of course. They always do. Whispers would spread. The proud son, the man who thought he owned everything, now stripped down to nothing. That kind of shame cuts deeper than any insult. And yet, through it all, I felt no guilt. Not a shred. Because this wasn't cruelty. This wasn't spite. This was justice. For every hour I sat helpless, for every time they dismissed me as useless, for every word that made me feel like a burden, this was balance. They thought I would swallow their disrespect until my last breath. Instead, I gave them silence and disappearance, the kind they could never undo. In the end, my son learned the truth too late. The old man he mocked still held the keys to everything, and with one phone call, I had locked the doors of his comfort forever. Now my life is simple, but it is mine. I live in a small town far away from the noise, the shouting, and the humiliation that once followed me every day. The house I rent is not large, but it is filled with peace. When I wake up in the morning, I hear birds outside instead of angry voices. When I roll my wheelchair to the window, the battery fully charged, I know it will be there for me. No one will ever steal it again. That feeling alone, the certainty that my freedom belongs to me, is worth more than anything I left behind. I spend my mornings slowly, making tea, cooking my own breakfast, eating in silence without anyone watching me like I am a burden. I wash my own dishes, but I do it with pride, because I am doing it for myself. In the afternoons, I take my wheelchair down quiet streets, sometimes to the market, sometimes just to feel the sun on my face. People greet me kindly, strangers who know nothing of my past, who see me not as baggage, but as a man. I do not tell them my story. I carry it inside, but I walk in dignity now, not shame. The money I secured is more than enough for me. I use it to pay my rent, my food, my medicine. I keep some aside for emergencies. And for the first time, I spend a little on things I want, not just what I need. A good blanket for winter. A comfortable chair for reading. Small things, but each one feels like a gift to myself. A gift I had been denied in my son's house. Sometimes I think of my stepson, the one my son always looked down on. I send him letters, small gifts, and he replies with warmth. He calls me Dad, with respect in his voice. He tells me he is proud of me. And though I lost one son to arrogance and cruelty, I gained another through gratitude. That makes the loss easier to carry. Do I miss my old life? Number. Because my old life was already gone the day my son chose to treat me as less than human. The day he took my wheelchair battery, he made it clear that my suffering meant nothing to him. That was the moment our bond died. All I did afterward was bury it with silence and a phone call. At night, I sit by the window and look at the stars. The quiet is heavy, but it is not painful. It is peaceful. I no longer wait for anyone to knock at my door. I no longer listen for footsteps that bring only insults. The loneliness I feel is clean. It is the kind that belongs to a man who chooses it, not the kind forced by humiliation. And in that peace, I have one final thought that carries me. He took my battery for his ride. I took back the life he thought he controlled.